To my understanding, I have just seen the news report that the Kanpur court granted bail to this person. Several people were seriously hurt, but no death has taken place, at least until what we know now. Bail is a concept under criminal law where the moment a person complains to the police say, we need to now investigate. During investigation, for several purposes, such as stopping the action from taking place, the offensive act to take place, or in order to prevent the person from running away, or in order to prevent the person from tampering with evidence, destroying evidence, or threatening, influencing witnesses, in order to prevent all of these things from happening and for the police to be able to process the investigation properly. They have the power given to them under the Bharatiya Nyay, the yes, the BNSS. The Nyay Sanhita is the IPC which provides for the offences. The BNSS is what gives the power to the police to arrest. But because the policing system was established by the British, they had certain benefits, but they also gave a lot of unchecked power to the police. We have, over the past centuries that these processes have evolved, we have been at least partly restrained in what kind of powers we give to the police. So one distinction is that there are some offenses, very, very minor offenses. Say one that I deal with on a lot of days is defamation. So if you go and file a police complaint in the local police station that Amish Agarwal defamed me, the police will say we do not have a power to even register a case, forget about arrest or not to arrest. There are other very, even say for example, causing simple hurt. Now, many such offenses which are of a smaller impact, the court say these are bailable offenses. Bailable means that the police have no right to arrest at all. And if they arrest, it is only a paper arrest where they will meet you. They will say, I am arresting this person on paper, and because this is a bailable offense, I am immediately releasing him by just giving his signatures on this arrest warrant. Nothing else can be done. Non-bailable offenses are those offenses where again the police have the decision making. They have the discretion whether they want to arrest or not arrest. A lot of people think non-bailable matlab I'll be arrested. That's not the case. Non-bailable means the police have the prerogative to choose whether they want to arrest or not. And if they choose to arrest, then they cannot give you the bail. Then if it's a non-bailable case, if they arrest, then you will have to apply for bail before the concerned criminal court having jurisdiction over the offense and over the police station. So for example, if I commit murder or any other very grievous offense, the police can still choose to not arrest me. They say we have no reason to arrest you because the investigation is complete, you've joined investigation, you've not threatened, intimidated witnesses, or you're not tampering with evidence. None of these things. Why do we need your custody? It is not our job to punish you. It is the judge's job to punish you, and that punishment will happen once we file the charge sheet, a trial takes place, and the judge comes to a conclusion on proof beyond reasonable doubt that you did commit this offense. And so therefore, the police can choose to not do it, but very often, practically, let's say, I would say 90% of the non-bailable cases, the police do exercise their power to arrest. There are a lot of scenarios where they don't, especially when, say, the accused person is, bribery is a very common aspect of life in India. On one hand, there are cases which are non-bailable offenses where because of bribing or because of political pressure or connections or etc., police say in a non-bailable case where arrest should have taken place, we are not arresting. But conversely, like we will be discussing, there are cases where the police have no authority to arrest, it being a bailable offense, yet they say we are arresting you. Because not because they have to follow the law, but because public sentiment or some sort of personal sentiment or some sort of personal motivations are involved. When a bail application reaches the judge, it is usually a little more severe offense than usual because the bailable offenses have already been filtered out. There is no bail application before a judge for a bailable offense. Non-bailable cases, a lot of these cases, there is the concept of anticipatory bail, which means that the person was never taken into custody. The person says, I am afraid of getting arrested. Therefore, please grant me protection from arrest. Or the technical language used in the court is that if the judge grants you anticipatory bail, the judge says in the event of arrest, this person will be released on signing this bail bond. So that's one anticipatory bail. Another thing what we lawyers called is regular bail, which means the person has, another concept is regular bail, what we call as regular bail, which means that the person has already been arrested and taken into custody by the police. because of which now a regular bail has to go before the judge. Now, either of these situations, there is a little bit of difference, but for the general public, let's say, the considerations for grant of bail for an accused person by a judge, the top four which have been propounded hundreds of times by the Honorable Supreme Court. Number one is, what is the possibility of the person running away from the jurisdiction of the court? Number two is, what is the possibility of tampering with evidence or influencing witnesses? Another consideration which comes up is the severity of the offense, and another is that the person is giving undertakings to join investigation or not. Now, these are on paper, yes, and the final one is the agreeability of the accused person to join investigation and to appear before the court as and when directed to do so by either the judge or by the police. Now, these are written on paper as considerations, but as a criminal lawyer, having done this for almost 13 years now, what transpires in the actual courtroom is something which is very different. There are many considerations involved. The police or the other investigating agency, like the CBI, the Enforcement Directorate, etc., they are standing there with their own reasons of why bail should not be granted. As a defense counsel, I see on a lot of occasions these conditions are mentioned on paper, but what is transpiring during arguments is a very different scenario. When a judge wants to give bail, the judge will mention that there is no possibility of tampering with witnesses or tampering with evidence or influencing witnesses, and the investigation is almost complete. But when the judge does not want to give bail, then the judge merely says two things: the offense is very severe and the investigation is still pending. That's all the judge needs to say, and dismiss bail on most days. And so, what we read in the judgments or in the news reports, unfortunately, is very different from what actually transpires in a courtroom, which has the judge on the criminal side of the bench, and then you've got the police assisted with the public prosecutor. You've got the accused standing there holding his hands in front of the judge along with his defense counsel. Things transpire in a very, very different way. A lot of people, when we talk about the money, the amounts mentioned, surety bond, bail bond, personal bond, a lot of people think, oh, bail is a right or bail is a privilege for the select few, for the select privileged few. It is a very big misconception in this country, partly because of the fact, perhaps we watch a lot of American Hollywood movies where, bail amount, you need the money, and that money needs to be submitted either with the police or with the, the judiciary, and then that person was able to get the accused person inside jail out. In India, it is a very different concept. No money actually exchanges hands ever, except maybe 0.001% of the cases where some severe economic offense is there or something very different is taking place. So I'll tell you 99.999% of the times what is happening is, when the judge says 20,000 bond, it literally means you're signing a piece of paper which says that I am agreeing that I will come to the court. The undertaking that I'm giving is, whenever the judge calls me, whenever the police call me, I will attend the court proceedings, police investigation whenever I am needed. If I don't, then I am giving undertaking that I will be liable to pay 20,000 rupees. This is what happens in personal bond. Surety bond means another friend, family member, someone who can hold this person accountable also comes and vouches and says, if this person does not come, then I will be liable to pay 20,000 rupees. And sometimes, I would say 1% of the cases in India, it is very unfortunate, the kind of economic disparity that is there. The judge also says, I will need you to show that you have this much resources. So, very poor person, sometimes he's not able to, usually 90% of our cases, what we show is a fixed deposit that we have made in our name and we are showing to the court. We just deposit that money is not even being taken on the record. And a lot of times, my car registration certificate, RC, my car RC, my scooter, my bike RC is also sufficient proof of solvency that we need to show to the court. So it is a very well accused friendly system, I must say, because a lot of people also now in some aspects in the criminal justice system, the justice system is very heavily against the accused person, in as much as a lot of false cases happen, a lot of illegal arrests happen. But at least when it comes to furnishing bail bonds, it is very accused friendly system where I can literally sign a piece of paper that yes, I will in the future 20,000, 50,000, whatever, and then I run away, I abscond. And it is very difficult for the police also to track me in this massive country of ours. So a lot of times there are people who run away from the process of the justice system as well. And partly that is also the reason why a judge, where he wanted to, he could have and he should have granted bail, says, I'm not sure whether this person will actually show up, especially because of these, bail bond signing things. It's better to keep the person in custody. That is the irony of our, justice system. I will start by saying, I will never deny that privileged people have better access not just to justice but they can get away by doing a lot of things, from Jessica Lal murder case to million other examples we've had. But not because the judge sahab gave bail very easily and another person would not have been able to get bail very easily. A lot of times police are very easily bribed. It's a very well-known reality of our country, and because of which things like this happen. In this case though, I feel it is a travesty that the person was arrested by the police in the first place. Not because he's rich or poor, but because when as a civilized society, we have to follow rules. If tomorrow, for example, drinking milk, you say that from today drinking milk becomes illegal, so Amish drank milk yesterday, now we will arrest him for drinking milk. That is an abhorrent society where nobody can be expected to then follow rule of law or get any protection from the laws. As unfortunate as it is, in our country, there are several laws which are very, very lacking. It may be very emotionally overwhelming for a lot of people. This rich kid crashed into people, as we assume privilege, we assume wealth means privilege and the fact that he should get away. I ask anybody who's watching, if this was not a kid in a Lamborghini, but a kid in a Maruti 800, then did he deserve to be arrested and stay in jail? If so, approach your local lawmaker and ask him to make grievous hurt by rash and negligent act a non-bailable offense. The absurdity of a system, just because there is a little bit of hue and cry, just because, let us assume that this was a spoiled kid who crashed into a bunch of people, caused injuries. And the travesty is, this thing has been lamented by people all over the country for the past several years, that in hit and run cases or in even death by rash and negligent acts, it was a bailable offense until recently. Now, the absurdity of our system and the way laws are made is because there were a few cases here and there. One, the lack of logic of our honorable Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court says, if the logics that were created, right, which we can talk about over here because it's a pertinent fact, if it's a rash and negligent act, if you cause an accident and that caused the death, it's a bailable offense. But if you were drunk while you caused the rash and negligent act, somehow the Supreme Court comes up with the logic which I have never agreed with, which I could never make sense of, which is that if you were drunk, then you should have known that you being drunk and then driving, that the chances of causing death is so high that we will not say this was death by rash and negligent act. This was actually culpable homicide, which whatever was the way that the rash and negligent act was caused. If it was rash and negligent act, you cannot start attributing more. But what happened, according to me, was the Honorable Supreme Court said there is a lack in legislation. People should not be able to get away by killing someone, even if by mistake. So let us, at least in drunk driving cases, attach this more severe penalty. The government also steps in after a bunch of people die, and the government starts doing this, this BNS, legislation. They come up with this absurd logic, which I've talked about in the past. In a hit and run case, if you do not inform the authorities and then you run away, then there will be a higher penalty in comparison to if you just hit and run and then you call up the police. The logic is, I am supposed to tell on myself if I cause any accident and that accident causes death. Anyways, that is maybe perhaps too much to go into for the purpose of this particular video. Here I say, but the thing is, that is for death by rash and negligent act. Here there was no death either. And as emotional as you get about the plight of that poor person on the street who got run over, would you have felt so much of anger if the person who got run over was not a rickshawala, not a poor person, but in fact another Lamborghini owner? Then perhaps it would not have been so bad. Would it have been so bad if the person doing the running over was not a Lamborghini owner or Lamborghini owner's son, but in fact a person driving a Maruti 800? It would not have been so bad. Now, I have not gone through the bail order myself. I have read reports about what the bail order cited. A lot of times, it's very unfortunate, especially in non-metropolitan cities. The judge, according to me, it should have been reported that the judge should have said, how can you take a person into custody in a bailable offense? But apparently, from the news report, it seems that the judge granted bail citing procedural irregularities and the undertaking given by the person. According to me, no matter how emotional we get. And I must say this, if it was my own, one of my parents, one of my close family members who got hit, I would be angry. I might go and murder the person myself. But will I expect the police to arrest the person under a non-bailable offense when there is lack of legislation? Then I will be afraid to step out of my own house, because I don't know tomorrow for what. Maybe I threw a plastic wrapper outside the trash bin and then I'm arrested, and then perhaps I'm sent to jail for 10 years. I don't know. There has to be a rule of law has to be followed. And if we start making exemptions on the basis of our emotions, let us have the best example of them all. In the Nirbhaya case, the teenager who was below 18, who apparently committed the most atrocious acts upon the victim, still was imposed only a maximum of 3-year sentence, and everybody went up in arms. How could this person, because I think he was 17 and a half or something, how could he be let go? But at least in that moment, we as a civilization, it was the act was abhorrent, but at the very least there was still a little bit of trust, a little bit of faith which was reimposed in the judicial system. Because if we don't have that, we are no better than an anarchy. As an Indian lawyer, I cannot do justice to any comparison that I would know of. I've heard bits and pieces, news, some clients abroad, etc. But at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to have stronger laws covering various scenarios. The problem with our criminal justice system, one is the procedure, extra powers given to the police in some areas, less power given to the police in other areas, power to the judge, power to the prosecutor, power to the accused person. These things have to be managed better. There have to be provisions for various different situations as they arise. No country is perfect, no society is perfect. With every problem or every roadblock that we see, we come up with legislation. But on the other hand, I would also not want it to be a knee and jerk reaction where X thing happens, so now you have to double and triple down with the most atrocious laws as well. We need to, as a society, have a balanced, centered approach towards addressing any legal, say, loopholes or shortcomings which are there. But also remember that how do I put a nuanced point? It's very difficult. On one hand, it is you need better laws, but on the other hand, let's not get carried away. That's what I would say. The Lamborghini hit and run case, section 125 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, even if grievous hurt was caused, the maximum sentence that can be awarded is 3 years. However, at 3 years means that this is not so much of severe offense, and this is anyways a bailable offense. But it is unfortunate now, because of the news and the hue and cry, this person was arrested because he had, what I'm assuming, the best lawyer in Kanpur. He was able to get bail very quickly. If there was hue and cry and he did not have such a good lawyer, there's a very good chance that even in a bailable offense where he should not have spent even a minute in custody, he would have still spent a couple of weeks, after which and the magistrate court would have very severe offense, people hurt, without following any logic, would have still denied bail, and then perhaps a week, a month or 3 months into custody, the person would have gotten bail. A lot of people say access to justice becomes much better if you are rich. It is sometimes true, but I will also offer this. Access to justice is better because of good lawyers. Good lawyers sometimes do charge a lot more money, but not always. And I, as a professional, know thousands of incredibly good lawyers who do a lot of pro bono, that is free legal representation for a lot of people as well. Access to justice a little bit comes down to luck, comes down to having good lawyers. Sometimes you pay, sometimes you get connected to a good lawyer. Saying that saying that, yes, if you throw money at the problem, a lot of times the odds become a little better. I will concede that. But this whole situation is very unfortunate according to me, because just because it is a rich versus poor thing, now you want some sort of a retrospective amendment and you can point fingers on the police and on the judge. Well, I am pointing fingers on the police despite having no connection to this case. I don't know these people. I have zero idea about this except from whatever I've read on the news reports. But just because it was a 10 crore car and not a 2 lakh rupee car, that this whole excitement and this whole thing is going on. And what happens in other cases around the country, in hit and run case, comparison to say maybe a stabbing case, or maybe a case where someone punched somebody else, overall scheme of things, I will still say rash and negligent act, even if grievous hurt is caused, bailable does not mean that you will never face any problem. Now, here the duty is of the police officers and the complainants to follow up properly with the judicial system. And at the end of the investigation being complete, the charge sheet being filed, the judge issuing summons to the accused person, holding a trial, everybody coming and testifying before the court, and the court then awarding a conviction sentence of up to 3 years, whatever the court deems fit. Could be 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in jail. Honestly, according to me, is sufficient punishment. The problem though, circling back to affluent versus not so affluent. If you're affluent, you can hire a good lawyer, and that good lawyer can do his job and figure out what were the loopholes, the problems, exploit every possible way in the system. That, according to me, is, as a society, something we have to strive against. We have to strive to ensure that witnesses cannot be influenced, cannot be threatened, evidence cannot be tampered, the police do not create a weak charge sheet deliberately because they took bribes, etc. But on the other hand, just because it is a highly publicized case, because the person purchased a Lamborghini, and then that Lamborghini was the one which committed the act, does not mean that in a case which otherwise, on the pure appreciation of evidence, deserved an acquittal, now you are convicting the person just because there was news coverage. What does that mean? Trial by media, conviction by media, the conviction flowing from the hands of the judge. But because this was a sensationalized case, now let's do it. But having said that, I turned around a third time and I say, in this short attention span world right now, how many people will be interested 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the line when the judge has to decide who will actually stand in the courtroom with their notepad and pen and say, we are reporting on this incident, and will there be a pressure or not? And if there is no pressure, and then Judge Sahab sitting over there in his little district court chamber in the back and he's writing it down, then there are other factors such as what the public prosecutor Sahab said, what the defense counsel Sahab said, what the accused person said, what were the people in the back thinking. And I must mention this, the level of corruption that is there, not just in the policing system, but also in the judiciary. The learned court will have a very hard time resisting temptations. But and I keep running around in circles because of not just the temptation, but also the appearance of the possible temptations happening. There might be a possibility, just because the man was rich, we must hang him. Otherwise, fingers will be pointed at me that you took a bribe. What changes can there be? There are a million changes which can be there. What are the changes required in the criminal justice system? Millions of them. Perhaps we can start out with better reform in the investigation processes with the police, where instead of them just making written notes or collecting CCTV improperly, they should start collecting video testimonies of the witnesses. They should start doing better preservation of electronic evidence, which is lost, I would say 80% of the times any of these cases happen. Apart from that, there should be a little bit of... My problem is, whenever I'm thinking about any change, I am thinking about the opposite end of the spectrum consequences that will take place. So for example, I was just about to say a judge should be given a little more a little more trust should be imposed in the decision making power of a judge. But then at the same time, we've got rampant cases of corruption in the judiciary. So then we say that judges should be scrutinized a little more, but the moment we start scrutinizing judges, then there is another host of problems. Then the judges are not free to make a decision without influence of other players. I must say I'm clueless. It's always in my mind, it's always a pendulum which swings. If you try to improve things for a certain section or in certain ways, there will be some very real, very, very problematic challenges which will appear. Perhaps that makes me think, because of the aforementioned reasons, artificial intelligence should not be able to take my job, at least for the next few years. I guess that's all I can say on this.